And welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're really appreciative. My name is David Lewis Peart, and I am the Youth Services Analyst with the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies. I'm here alongside our partners, StepStones for Youth, the P2PKE space rather, has been in operation for the last 4 years. It was an initiative started by Shuarovskis and has been available to those in and adjacent to the child welfare space as an opportunity for us to share best practices and learn about all the great things that are being done across the province. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague over at StepStones for more.
Hey everybody, my name is Leora Sobel. I'm the COO at StepStones for Youth. It's wonderful to see so many of you, and I thank you so much for coming out and joining this afternoon with us. Very excited about our presentation today. So we have Heidi Walter here with us. So if I can just share a bit about Heidi. Heidi's journey is one of dedication to supporting vulnerable youth and families, rooted in her background in social work and frontline experience. With over 2 decades of commitment to addressing youth homelessness, she brings a wealth of knowledge and insight to her role as program design and training consultant at Away Home Canada. Her work extends beyond borders as she collaborates with agencies across Canada and internationally, amplifying the voices of young people and driving positive change within the sector with the hope to end and prevent youth homelessness. Before joining Away Home Canada, Heidi supported the work at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness as a trainer, where she not only conducted training, but also conducted fidelity reviews, ensuring quality and effectiveness in programs. Her earlier tenure at the Boys and Girls Club of Calgary, managing the Housing First for Youth programs for 17 years, showcases her longstanding commitment to providing essential services and support to vulnerable youth. Within Away Home Canada, Heidi offers support with the Making the Shift Youth Homelessness Demonstration Lab, where she provides coaching and training to community partners across Canada and internationally. Through her hands-on approach, she empowers others to deliver person-centered care, effectively fostering a community dedicated to improving the lives of young people and practitioners alike. Heidi's passion for her work is evident, dedicating time to sharing knowledge, providing support, and fostering a sense of community within the youth homelessness sector, with the ultimate goal of working towards a future where all youth have access to support opportunities and permanent connections they need to thrive. So it is my absolute pleasure to hand over this screen to Heidi. We're very pleased to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And thank you, everybody, for being here. It was very exciting for me to be able to be asked to come and hold space with you and join you on your monthly meetings that you come together on. If we can start off, so we have fabulous individuals who are changing the slides for me. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Before we begin, I just want to share a little bit about myself and acknowledge where I come from, and the beautiful nation that I have the privilege to sit with. In the spirit of reconciliation, I do want to share with you that I work, live, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is comprised of the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina Nation, the Nakota Nations, and the Métis Nation Region 3, 5, and 6, and all of the beautiful people that make homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. My birthplace is Treaty 1 territory, the lands of the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwa, the Inuit Cree, the Oji-Cree, the Dene, and the Dakota, and the birthplace of the Métis Nation and the heart of the Métis Nation homeland, also known as Winnipeg. Next slide, please. As Lior shared with you, I sit with you today as somebody who is very passionate about my work with Away Home Canada. For those of you who are familiar or not familiar, just a little bit about Away Home Canada. We are a national coalition, so we reach from province to province, coast to coast, and in the beautiful territories. And we support organizations. We have three bodies of work, really. We have our practice arm, we have our policy arm, and we also have our very big planning arm. And so really what those mean is I come from the practice side with my background in frontline work and managing and supporting within the youth sector and the prevention and the homelessness pieces. And we have fearless leaders who are constantly lobbying and working with different bodies of government who are trying to change policy and trying to recognize young people and young people's policies and understanding what that really looks like. We do stretch across Canada, the United States, and Europe as we have a United Nations designation. And so we also support with a learning community. We have numerous community of practice calls every month. And as Leora said, we also run many demonstration projects. So that's through the Making the Shift. So we have different projects that are going on right now. One, which is our family natural supports over for the next year. Next slide, please. We're also attached, for those of you who do know or don't know, we are also attached to the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness, which is based out of York University in Toronto. They are a very large research-based and poly partnership. So we do a lot of research to practice and knowledge mobilization through practice and then our body of work with the research. And they focus on the prevention of homelessness. And they've been around for over a decade, really focusing on building an evidence base and paving the way for governments and communities to move from addressing homelessness through that emergency crisis response and really moving to preventing it altogether. And so the topic that I have been asked to share with you today is an evidence-based and something that we've been researching for close to 7 years now, which is the family natural supports model. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I just wanted to share with you really quickly overview, just to give you a little bit of a visual of a timeline that we've been working on since 2014, where it's really about the Housing First for Youth, and then also how we gradually get to the Making the Shift demonstration projects and how we also get to a place around family natural supports and those designs and understanding that. As a service provider, my history in service provider, it's always important for us to hear from the young people and those that are receiving our services and supports, including families, chosen families, and natural supports, and really investing in them and their journeys and really hearing them and using our voice to amplify what they're sharing back with us. And so all of our pieces of research that you see or that you hear from us are grounded in folks that we've learned from service delivery or folks that have been using the services or individuals who have been supporting young people through those. Next slide, please. As you know, for many of you that you know, just wanting to share this with you, wanting to draw a little bit of that visual again of the picture of homelessness or those who are unhoused. 80% of the individuals who are experiencing homelessness or unhoused currently are needing those basic supports, those financial assistance, really kind of minimal case management. And one of the things that we notice is that a lot of the individuals who need to access emergency supports, once they receive those supports, they actually do really well and they don't actually enter into emergency services or into being unhoused again. That's often because the majority of service users that we do see have some foundation. And so they've had an experience like losing a partner, losing employment, those types of things where they're needing a little bit of support, but they're able to move on once they are given those supports. The next box that I want us to focus on is the 15 and the 5% of the individuals. So these individuals, the 15 and my apologies, the 5 to 10%, really these people, if thinking about supports that you offer and the individuals that you walk alongside, these are also people that know how to maybe access clinics on their own, opposed to that 5% that maybe don't really know how to access our systems of care. Maybe they don't fit within those boxes. Some of the systems, maybe the services don't necessarily fit for them. They're not prescribed for them, those more traditional services that we have. individuals finding it more difficult to keep appointments, those types of individuals, some that are living with addictions, have undiagnosed mental health, maybe not knowing where to access clinical support. So those are the ones that we're focusing more with the high acuities or high complexity in people. Those ones have often shared with us that they're experiencing being unhoused for longer periods of time, couch surfing, precariously housed, whichever language young people use. And so the other big piece where we're going to talk about is that there's also a stronger disconnect to their family natural supports and chosen families. So those threads are really loose, or they're disconnected completely. And so one of the things that we've been learning from our research and learning from the young people, families, chosen families, and natural supports is that there's the need of help to bring those threads back together and to bring those relationships back together, because they've been so damaged due to conflict and a very varying areas of situations that they've been in or experiences that they've had. And so really focusing on that 5% that might be more complex. Next slide, please. So these are just some basic stats for you here that we've recently collected, that over 40,000 young people across Canada are experiencing homelessness, and 7,000 on any given night. And the majority of that population is the 16 to 24 age range. Next slide, please. So some things that we've learned through our research, so again, directly from the young people, and that young people goes up to 29 and 30 within our category of young people. What we've learned is that a number of these young people have had involvement with children protection, MCFD, whichever language that you use, children's intervention. So 73.3% of youth who have become homeless before the age of 16 reported in having children's services involvement. What we also know is that we have higher rates of placement in foster care and group care compared to the young people who first left home. Next slide, please. So why are youth leaving home? We know that family conflicts, and this is again coming from young people that we've surveyed, sat with, have focus groups with, is family conflict and instability are often seen as the root causes for homelessness. We released a national youth homelessness survey that went from coast to coast a few years ago. There was over 1,100 young people that gave us their information and were a part of this research project. And what we learned was 77.5% of young people were leaving home, or was the main factor that drove them from their homes was family conflict. Now, what I want to describe a little bit about family conflict is that it's not as simple as there was some fighting going on. We do know that there's sometimes substances involved. We know that there's mental health complexities. We also know that there is sometimes a form of abuse that's going on. But when we started to get curious and when we started to dig with young people around what was it like before that, young people were able to take us back to a time where they said, I remember when it was just fighting. I remember when it was we couldn't get along. And then things became more intense and things amped up. And then things were said that couldn't be unsaid. And then there became fighting or forms of abuse that were in the home. And so when we asked questions to young people around what point would have made a difference, or would it have helped to support that, young people said yes, it would have made a difference before it got so volatile, or when it got to the place where I was leaving the home, or when I was being told that I needed to leave the home. And so this is why we've been focusing a lot of our efforts on the prevention pieces and moving farther upstream. So we're not waiting for young people to walk into our services, that we're really wanting to focus on how can we support before it gets to that place where those words are said or things are absolutely in the young person's minds not repairable. I do also want to say that there are some young people definitely that aren't able to live at home, or it's not safe for them to live at home. So I'm definitely not suggesting that all young people should be at home. There are definitely some young people in some situations where that shouldn't happen. But what we have on the flip side of that is that if young people are saying that they can't be at home, or we know that there's such safety risks that they aren't able to be at home, what are we doing to support them to build new community, to explore opportunities for them to have different relationships, build new relationships? So always focusing on, if this isn't an option, what can we provide as far as creating new relationships or looking further into that extended kinship family. Next slide, please. All of you, I'm sure, are very well versed in adverse childhood experiences. And so what we do know for those young people who are leaving home at an earlier age is that they do have those higher ACEs experiences. But then, as you can see here, they also have a higher likely degree of having some of these as outcomes as well. That's not always the case. But what we're learning from the young people that we're spending time with is that they are experiencing higher numbers of in these areas, which is obviously leaving them much more vulnerable. Next slide, please. So one of the things that Away Home Canada and the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness is focused on is on the top there. You can see how we live very much in Canada from emergency response. I'm sure none of you are from any kind of city or area in Canada that we see that there's a lot of money that gets spent in emergency response, new shelters being opened up, new emergency hubs being opened up, so on and so forth. And so what we would like to do is really want to help those federal people, funders. We want those policymakers to help understand that if we move the bulk of efforts that are being invested in Canada more into the middle, so that emergency response goes down a bit, and we actually focus more of our attention on the prevention and the housing stabilization with supports, that we actually will have better outcomes for young people, their family, their chosen family, their natural supports. And so really wanting to invest in, we just don't want to have the huge investments that we do across the country right now in emergency responses. We do have some data that does show how much more effective, cost effective it is. And that's something that our federal government and our provincial governments do want to hear about. That prevention is actually a more affordable response, if you will, than operating shelters or group care, as far as from a cost model per se. And so really wanting to fix that imbalance that we currently have. And it's not to say that we want to get rid of emergency responses. I see shelters and other emergency responses very similar to hospitals. We always will need those emergency services, but what can we do once we're not sitting in the ER, and where do we go when we're not using the ER? So not completely getting rid of those where we can go at 2 a.m. when we need help, but what do we do to move on from there quickly? Next slide, please. So this here is just an overview quickly of the models that we work within. And so we have, as you can see on the left-hand side, it's our family natural supports. Then we also have shelter diversion, which is something that we are working with lots of different communities and also young people across the country to be able to understand, like, what is it that you thought was going to happen when you entered shelter, or when somebody gave you the shelter number? What did you think was going to be waiting there for you? Or did your needs get met when you accessed shelter? What do you think shelters should be providing? And really being curious about what they think services should look like within that system. And then also we have our school-based interventions, which is Upstream and Reconnect. And then we have Housing First for Youth on the right-hand side. And though we see Housing First for Youth still as a prevention model, it would be our most, I would say, intensive supports that we offer. We really want to make sure that young people don't have to go into the adult systems. And so we try to work within this continuum of supports and services to make sure that we can end their experience or have them connected so they don't have to necessarily go into adult services for the long period. And so, one of the things that we started to learn through all of our core principles that we have within each of these models is that it was all speaking about the same thing, which we ended up realizing was family and natural supports. So, in the Housing First for Youth model, the fifth core principle is social inclusion and community integration. In Reconnect, it's about community and connection, which all means family, natural supports, chosen family, connection to community, however you want to use that, and really however the young person wants to define what family means to them, what natural supports means to them, and what community and chosen family means to them. So one of the things that we have learned about family natural supports, and there's so many different programs and organizations who are really embracing the family natural supports model, is that it can be a standalone program. So we have great programs that if you would like to connect with me, I would be happy to point you in the direction of who's running true family natural supports programs where community organizations or internal referrals are coming to family natural supports workers where they can offer those services. But more recently, we're seeing full organizations, some in Alberta and some here in Ontario, who have now made a commitment to shift their entire practices and every service that they offer within their agency into a family natural supports philosophy. So it's not landing on just family natural supports workers to do this type of work, but everybody's being curious and everybody's digging in from first connection to the phone calls to every engagement that they have with young people. Next slide, please. So here again, just another visual for you around some of the ways that we look at and explore with young people. And of course, these aren't all of them that young people may come through, but a pathway that we are seeing more and more common is that young people are coming directly from home. They're coming from school. They're coming from, they're ending up in crisis or shelter situations, drop in and outreach and community. And so we're really trying to hone in on all of these areas where we're trying to share with individuals around this family natural supports model and seeing what supports they could use in all of these different types of organizations. So it doesn't necessarily have to be youth organizations, but we're actually introducing the family natural supports model into the adult services this coming summer because they're also seeing those 18 to 29-year-olds in their services, but also to say that those that are 29 to 60 or to 70 also don't need family natural supports and chosen family as a part of their safety net as they're going through their journey. So we're seeing young people return back to the family home, or they're staying with other members of family, however they define family again. They're staying with chosen kin. We also have lots of different organizations who are providing supportive housing. We're seeing lots of different types of temporary housing, including host homes and Night Stop. For those of you who are familiar with that, those diversion housing models, and then also settled accommodations. And so whatever that looks like within your community, but here, just giving you some language about how we see that. Next slide, please. So the one thing that is absolutely so important, and we tell this to young people all the time, is that the goal of the family natural supports model is not for young people to have to live at home with families, chosen families, or natural supports. The word family can often be misconstrued, and so we want to make sure that young people understand that when we talk about family, we talk about the individuals that you identify as your family. We're not here to tell you who family should be or who they shouldn't be. And so one of the things that we also understand is that families sometimes work better when they don't live together, but that doesn't mean that they still can't spend time together, have holidays together, do Sunday dinners together, whatever that might be. One of the things, and I'm just coming fresh on a break from Family Natural Supports training today, is we often have heard a fabulous organization out of Montreal had said today that there's a lot of times that we hear that youth come from bad families. And that we were unpacking today, that's often a working assumption, that maybe young people are coming from a home that wasn't the best for them. But when we use the word family, it can be a very large word. And so are we really knowing that the great aunts and the great uncles and the grandparents and the second cousins are all negative influences, are not people that could be support for these young people? And so really wanting to be cautious about how many individuals we implicate when we use the word family, because it can be really big. And then also, family doesn't mean that we're always connected to blood. We have some people in our families, and maybe in all of yours, that we're more connected to people that we don't share bloodlines with, and that doesn't mean that they're not family. Next slide, please. The one thing that we do know to be true, and we have some young people sharing that with us this week, is that they know that family natural supports are their number one protective factor. And so when you have individuals who you can call on in times of trouble, individuals that you can sit with and have celebrations, individuals that you can sit with to be able to vent to or talk about your day and how hard it was, and know that there's that safety net for you, is really important. And the idea around family natural supports is chosen families, that those relationships are really reciprocal. And so they're not those paid professionals, which we'll get into in a moment, because paid professionals are very important as well. Next slide, please. So this is our little cheat sheet, something that we've been working on since 2015. And so really has evolved over the years, the more that we learn. But I just want to take you through a couple of these that are really important. And so the first one, as you can see here on the left-hand side, it's our status quo approach. So how many of us who've been working in the field for any amount of given time have really shown up. And so again, not that professional supports aren't important, but what would it look like if we moved more to a natural supports approach? And so instead of thinking that every young person needs to be connected to professionals, what if we actively sought out relationships within the youth network? And so one of the things that I often share with folks is that professional supports, while they are very vital and important, they are not sustainable. My dentist or my doctor doesn't call me on Friday on his way home from work and ask me how my work week was. They're not people that walk alongside me, but they're important individuals for me to have, because I need them when I need their services. And they're good people and they're respectful, but they're not people that walk alongside me in life. One of the other things too is the number 3 here, and we speak a lot about this, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on the next slide, which is we, myself anyways, I shouldn't say we and include everybody, but I definitely have been working in the field in a time where I've seen quite a big shift. But there was a time where I was working in group care, or I was working in other housing providers, where I was given the impression, and it was put on me, that my job was to protect young people. So to call them in when they were AWOL, and to make sure that they didn't go to places that they weren't allowed, and, so on and so forth. And one of the things that we've started to unpack and realize is that these young people aren't with us 24 hours a day, even though some of our programs are 24 hours. They leave. We hope that they go to school. They leave the buildings, whatever that may look like. And so are we actually protecting young people is a question that we continue to really talk about with young people, talk with their chosen family natural supports. We want to start looking at more of a connection idea, and maybe saying, you know what, we don't protect because we go on holidays, we do turn our phones off on the weekend, we do switch jobs and get promotions or try other work out. And so are we truly protecting? And so maybe taking more of a harm reduction approach around that protection versus connection idea. Next slide, please. And so one of the things that we also talk about a lot is that sometimes separation is helpful. Many of us might be able to reflect on a time where we needed to have that cool down moment. Things have become too heated, too amped up, and we might not have the right coping mechanisms. Families, chosen families, might not have the right coping mechanisms. But what we do know is that from our research is that long-term separation is not helpful. We were reflecting earlier this week around how sometimes we're driving in the car and we're like, oh, I haven't talked to that person. Maybe it's a family member, a longtime friend, somebody. And we're in the car and we're like, shoot, I didn't call them this week. And that week can turn into sometimes 6 months. And all of a sudden, that 6 months can turn into a year. And now that separation has become thicker and it's become more clouded, and now all of a sudden it feels a little bit trickier to pick up that phone and it becomes a little bit more difficult. And so we have spoken with adults who have been accessing emergency shelters or have been in housing first programs, and they'll say sometimes like, I haven't talked to my family, or I haven't talked to my friends, or I've been disconnected from my community for 10 years. I wouldn't even know where to start. And it's those kind of sentences that we think about. That long-term separation can often be harmful or not helpful. Again, we're not asking families to necessarily have to live under the same roof. We might realize, or we might help individuals realize, that they don't have space in their life for those particular individuals. But there are a lot of young people, 77.5%, that do want to have a relationship with families and that do want connection with their families, whatever that looks like and whoever that looks like for them. And so not wanting to keep that separation super elongated, because it can be more difficult as more time goes on. We also want to talk about like how, or we reflect a lot on blow up does not always mean breakdown. Lots of our families have shared with us that they often have been raised in homes where there was tension or there was arguing and it never really got resolved, or the next day it wasn't just talked about, or was pushed under the rug, or those people left the home and they never saw them again, and so don't really know what to do once a blow up or an argument or a disagreement happens. And so trying to teach that blow up always doesn't mean breakdown. We can come back to it. We can figure out if there's a way, and figuring out if that's what those people want. One of the things that we've also heard a lot from families, which would have taken incredible courage and vulnerability, is that when their child is not living at home, it doesn't mean that they don't love their child. But some families have shared with us, and some in Toronto, who were just so incredibly courageous to be able to share this, because it wouldn't have been easy, is that it's a bit nice when the young people are not living at home. There's not a lot of sibling fights, we've heard. The dishes stayed done. The house remains clean. There's no arguments. There's no yelling. There's no foods in the room. It felt nice. They were able to catch their own breath. They were able to think. And that doesn't mean that families are bad for thinking that. It means that there's so much going on that it's hard, and families are sticky and they can be complicated. And so while it's important for us to hear and validate families that, yeah, I get it. When a sleepover is happening, you might enjoy your Friday night a little bit more because you've got peace and you can eat popcorn for dinner instead of making vegetables and so on and so forth. That we're providing a false sense of security to families that everything is okay over here in shelter or in group care or in our housing first for youth programs or transitional homes. And so really wanting to help families understand that, yes, we might be a professional that's being able to support right now, but we're not going to be here for forever. So we really want to look to see how we can bring you into this fold and how we can have you support us. Next slide, please. So here is some, we use this a lot in our Housing First for Youth programs, but we also use it very much in our family natural supports, just as a breakdown, a little bit of a cheat sheet. Of course, these are not check boxes and they're not totally complete. There's always going to be other things. But really, what we wanted to share with you here is that we really want to take a holistic approach, that it's not just understanding that relationships are important, but it's also what would support feel like for you. Working with some families through some situations today, there was so much family conflict in the home, but sitting with that family and really listening to them and having breakfast with them and understanding that the conflict, there was driving underlying forces of they're actually really concerned because March 31st is in 4 days and they don't know how to pay rent, and that their fridge is getting really empty, and that people are hungry. And so things are becoming more volatile in the homes because there's so many stressors and there's so many pressures. And so we have the opportunity in some of our family natural supports programs to say, okay, we realize that these are not long-term solutions, but what if we created some space for everybody to breathe? So let's get some groceries in the house. Let's actually take care of that rent so you can sleep tonight and not have to think about the next 4 days, and just create some space to be able to breathe, to figure out what are the other pieces that maybe these professional supports and our supports could be able to help you with or establish that will be able to create long-term outcomes for your family and your young people. We also really see the family as a unit. So we don't want to just think about the young person as our client, so to speak. I don't often use that word, but to see the whole family, whoever they define as their family or chosen family, as the individuals, and really giving thought and respect to the generation that is behind that young person, because it's not always the young person that is responsible for the change. It's not always the young person that should be bearing the weight of all of the responsibility or having to make adjustments, that we can really see the whole family. Next slide, please. So as I shared with you before, we're really seeing lots of organizations take this workplace culture shift. We had an opportunity last week to train some CAS workers within this model, and it was absolutely phenomenal to have these CAS workers in our training really share with us their viewpoint on what this work looks like and how they can partner differently with organizations to have this culture shift. And maybe they aren't able, because of policy and procedures, be able to make this shift completely, but are partnering organizations able to make this shift and support this work. And then, of course, how I mentioned earlier, we're also seeing lots of organizations who are taking this shift. And so right from the phone calls, asking different questions and being curious and digging in around, where did you stay last night? And where are you calling me from? And who's around you that can come with you so we can have coffee and talk about what it is that you feel that you need, and what supports you think will feel supportive to you, and not just us assuming what support would feel like. Next slide, please. And so going again back to that protection versus connection. And so this sometimes can feel like a challenging conversation, and it can feel conflicted, especially because some of us might be parents, some of us might be caring adults, whatever role we come to from work, we come with those values, we come with those ideas in mind about the world and how we see this work. But we also need to respect what safety and what those worldviews look like from a child and a young person. And then also their people and what that looks like, and the culture that they grew up within, and what their home felt like on Sunday evenings. And then also many of us work for organizations or systems. And so what does safety look like when it comes to policy and procedures that we need to follow? And so it just sometimes feels like we have to look at safety, and we have to look at all of these from different angles every single day in any decision that we make. But one of the things that we are unpacking in different levels all over the place, how I shared with you, from CAS workers to organizations to senior leadership within the youth sector, within our national learning community, is how can we make this shift, and what does it take for us to say, okay, maybe that protection versus connection is something that we need to be a little bit closer on. we've heard from so many CAS workers and MCFD workers and children's services workers that close to 80% of the young people that they support and work with actually return home to their families in some capacity, whether that's just couch surfing, whether that's celebrating holidays and so on and so forth, and obviously confirms that again in a small Ontario community last week with some CAS workers. And we've also learned this from young people as well as they're exiting out of systems or they're exiting out of programs, is that often they will go back to home. And so one of the things that we're having conversations about is how do we get young people ready for those relationships, and how do we get families and natural supports and chosen families ready for those relationships? Because a lot of those times there has been a huge amount of separation. And so instead of spending time protecting young people and determining who they should or shouldn't be with, should we be having conversations with young people around, I know that there's a chance that you might connect with this individual moving forward in your journey or when you're no longer with us. And so what do boundaries look like for you, and what do healthy relationships look like for you, and what kind of relationship do you want to have for them, or what space do you want to have with those people in your life? Having conversations with young people around sometimes loving an individual who means the world to you, but knowing that they hurt you, like those two feelings are feelings that can coexist with each other. Lots of us have experienced that. Like, why do we, why do we still miss somebody who wasn't necessarily a positive person in our life? And so teaching and allowing young people to know that it's okay and that there's some normalcy to having those conflicting feelings and giving them space to explore that and what that means for them and how they want to prioritize themselves, but also know that there's lots of people in the world that feel like this. Next slide, please. And so one of our last ones is, we haven't found a space where family and natural supports hasn't worked in yet. And so these are some of the areas that we are working with organizations, because we are not a service provider, but we work directly with service providers, but really learning from all of these individuals. And so spending time with folks like Dr. Alex Abramovich, for those of you who know, is one of our leading scientists within the 2S LGBTQ community. What does family and natural supports and chosen family look like in that 2S LGBTQ space? We're working with organizations in Alberta around what does family and natural supports look like in emergency shelters and in group homes and in group care and in foster care. What does it look like from young people that are leaving systems? What does it look like for Black and racialized young people, young parents, and newcomers to Canada, so on and so forth? And one of the other things that we're also exploring is, what does it look like within organizations that don't necessarily have family natural supports workers, but they have education and employment workers? And what does that look like? What does the digging look like in those roles? What does the curiosity look like in those roles? Next slide, please. And these are just a couple of things to share with you that we are going to be launching another demonstration site across Canada. So we're going to be collecting more data from more organizations, young people, family natural supports, and chosen family. We're also have just finished redesigning our family natural supports training, and it has just left the testing phase. So we are sharing it across the world. Actually, we've piloted it in 4 different communities in Europe. And then we're also at the end of this year, we have a goal to revise the Family Natural Supports Model Guide and also create an operations manual for folks. There has been huge requests for us to create an operations manual. So if any of those folks were you, we are working on it. And we've just recently completed a fidelity assessment tool, a tool I use, the language that I use in very loose terms, because a tool is only a tool. And so really doing more site visits and sitting with young people, family natural supports, the staff, and community stakeholders to find out what this work can look like, and so on and so forth. So, and our last slide, please. yeah, if there's any information that you would like more of around our community practice calls, any of our trainings that we offer, we've just also launched a new training called Foundations 101 that I would be happy to share more information with you. And then we also have a ton of free online training and learning resources at our homelessness learning hub that folks can actually get certificates for, that you can account to any credits that you need for any of your registrations that you have every year. So, and that is Family Natural Supports and a Way Home in a nutshell.
Thank you, Heidi, so much for joining us today and for sharing. We've got a few minutes, so I wonder if there are any questions. I don't know why I can't see this on my computer. So, sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing on the computer if anybody's got their hands up or has any questions. So I see some messages going through the chat. I mean, if it's okay, I wouldn't mind asking a question. Prior to the start of the presentation, we had an opportunity to talk a bit about the Work and Away Home Canada and working across Canada. And I've been obviously through your presentation hearing about the different areas that you go in. I just wonder, if there's anything remarkable that you could share with us that is being seen differently across provinces, is something takeaways that one could use from the other. Maybe a big question, but I'm quite curious about the entire landscape of Canada. Being an organization that right now is in Ontario, and myself having lived in Ontario, I can tell you a lot about our system here, but not as much as what's happening throughout the rest of Canada.
That is a really big question. I think that one of the things that when we're sitting in different communities is really asking a lot of questions instead of coming in as experts, because we're really noticing that every community is serving different young people. And we have some cities that are seeing more immigration. We're seeing more cities that are seeing refugees, but we're seeing other communities that are supporting more Indigenous young people or more 2S LGBTQ community people. So just using some of those populations as examples, as one of the pieces that stands out for me more is really saying, okay, how do you see, because you might be more informed on this, in these areas, on how to support young people putting these practices in place. And so really taking it from that, instead of it has to look this way, instead saying these are the core principles. How can these core principles look like in your work, and how can we start to focus more on family natural supports and chosen family? I think one of the big things too is that this isn't an aha, like we're not, this is a very westernized framework, a way of thinking of things. I think that there's lots of families and lots of communities. The Indigenous community, as one for hundreds of years, has lots of different communities and cultures across the world that have shared with us around it takes a community to raise a child. And so this is one of those ideas and those principles that we have put words to it in the Western world. And so I think that's something that has been a really big takeaway for me too, is that a lot of people, when we sit with them, they're like, of course, this makes sense. I need people for my 2 a.m. phone call. Of course, our young people would need 2 a.m. phone calls as well. And so I think it's just making these really gentle shifts around, that would be a commonality, I think, is that people are saying, yes, this is common sense. And it's almost permission giving, that people are like, oh, if this is actually preventing young people from coming into more intensive systems, why wouldn't we do this? And so I think that's what we're seeing. We're not seeing a lot of people saying, no, we can't do this. That would be another commonality. we're seeing most people saying, yes, this makes sense.
That's great. Thank you so much. Someone has their hand raised. Stephanie, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I have a question. I can turn my video on. It was interesting. Thank you. I don't trying to think. I do have a question. How to phrase it? Because I don't disagree with anything that you said, and it does make a lot of sense. It makes me uncomfortable because I don't want to offload our responsibility as a government to provide basic needs and assistance and to help
Mhm.
lift people up so that they have the capacity to engage with these supports. Like one of
Mhm.
your slides that compared the older way of thinking with family and natural supports was like these basic needs should be met immediately versus family and natural supports should be addressed immediately. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I'm talking from Ontario and I'm a lawyer at Justice for Children and Youth, and like where it gets me is like, oh, this is going to let children's aid societies deny kids a visa because why don't we just
Uh,
focus on their chosen family and maybe they could live there and maybe this is another version of admission prevention. Have you encountered that? And like, how do
hmm.
you address that is my question.
I hear what you're saying, and I do want to preface, family and natural supports is such a big piece. Like we usually spend 3 days in communities sitting and talking for this exact reason, Stephanie, because it's really hard to be like, this is family and natural supports in 55 minutes. I hope you feel like you got it all, the end, right? And so like for sure would love to have follow-up conversations with you that maybe you're like, okay, it's not the offloading that it could be presenting, right? Because I do believe that professionals and systems do hold a role. But the thing is that there was this beautiful young person in Oklahoma City, and they said to me, and they had had children's services involvement, and they were a guardian of the state, and but they still wanted connection to their family. And so this young person stands up with so much vulnerability and says, I just worked it out on my calculator that I'm going to live to the age of 87. I have no idea why he said 87 compared to 90 or whatever. And he said, my social worker is only going to be a part of my life for 3%. Who is helping me get ready for the other 97% right now? And I think that that was really eye-opening for all of the professionals in the room. That was like, how are we planting those seeds? So visas are important. And sometimes, like I said, young people do, like they can't, like children's services, CAS, they do have a really important role. And sometimes young people are not safe and we have to act quickly. But what are we doing, right? Like how are we inviting people to those visa meetings? Are we saying, here's your goal setting, here's your transition plans? I'm using language from Alberta, so I apologize if this isn't landing properly. But are we inviting their natural supports? Are we inviting their chosen family to say, bring them to the table? How can they support you in these goals? Because me as Stephanie, as your support person, as your professional support person, I'm only here for 3%. That person might be here for 20% or 40%. I want them to know what you've said is important to you and your goals. And so we're opening the door to them. And they might not be the healthiest of people, but our young people are telling us they're going anyways. Like they're going back home for Thanksgiving dinner. They're going back home and they are choosing, like they've exited the system and they don't want to stay in shelter. They're asking to come back home. So how are we preparing them for that? And so I think you're right. Like it's not a visas don't work. It's a, what else can we do besides visas? What can we get them ready for the next pieces? What pieces can we help get them providing opportunities now? If that, I don't know if that answers it's not a this or that. It can be a combination of things.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think it's just, I guess, and like you say, you can't present all of it in 55 minutes. It seems to me that family and natural support is obviously an essential part of the VISA plan, um, with the other government supports and like
Yeah.
providing housing, would be a key example is also like
Right.
it's part of the story. So I
Uh,
appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And like we had some incredible CAS workers that were saying, and again, it's just a handful of individuals, right? It's not everybody's experience. I know that everybody comes from different offices and I respect that absolutely. But they were saying like, yeah, it's time that we have conversations with our managers to say who else should be at the table to help these young people because we know that we close at 24. We know that we close at 25. And so who's there on 25 plus 1 day? Who did we prepare them with? Who did we reopen relationships with? Or if those relationships cannot be reopened, who did we start to allow those seeds to plant with other people?
Heidi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
This has
absolutely.
been
Thank you for having me.
It's
Yeah.
been so informative, and to your point, I think I could sit and do this for several days to learn more from you. So I really appreciate you being here, and on behalf of both OACS and StepStones, being a part of our peer-to-peer knowledge exchange, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And if folks want to follow up or if they're just like, that wasn't enough information about this piece, please contact Little Art because it is a big piece that it's not like I never would think that we would be able to cover all the intricacies in 55 minutes. So I absolutely respect that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody. Bye, Heidi.
Bye.